We're going to start with the AL East, and then we're going to do the NL East, and then coming up in future shows, we're going to get into the Central divisions and the West divisions. And the reason for this is I think it gives us this is a nice opportunity to reset and take a look at where things stand for every team here entering this offseason. What's their situation? What kind of season are they coming off of? How did that compare to the expectations we had for them? What moves have they made so far? What did they learn this past season? What are their key questions this offseason? What are their needs this offseason? So there's a lot of different things that we can discuss here. And so we're just going to go through the teams. I have a story up at 110sportsmedia.com right now for the AL East, NL East coming up on the website today as well. And we're just going to talk about these teams. We don't have time to get into, spend 20 minutes on the Orioles or anything like that, but just a quick hitting thing with a couple of thoughts on each of these clubs. Starting in the AL East, we're going to start with the Baltimore Orioles. I gave them a C plus for their 2020 performance, and in hindsight, maybe it should be a little bit higher than that. Keep in mind that the grades here, it's all relative to expectations. And the Orioles were projected for the worst record in baseball this year. But they were in the playoff race until the final weeks of the season. They struggled down the stretch, but they snapped a 3-year streak of last place finishes in the AL East. It was a productive. There were some things learned by the Orioles this year. They learned, for one, that Ryan Mountcastle could be a big cornerstone of the franchise for years to come. The 23-year-old hit .333 with 10 extra base hits in 35 games since he was called up this year. It looks like he could be a big bat for them for years to come. They have Jose Iglesias coming back after they exercised their option on him. Of course, he's this glove-first shortstop, but he actually had a great offensive season this past season. So they have him back in the fold. They have the second-rated prospect in Major League Baseball right now, according to MLB Pipeline. That's catcher Adley Rutschman, who he could be in the majors as soon as 2021. So that's something that they're looking forward to, and that's really going to mark when he gets promoted, the beginning of this next era for the Orioles. He could make the majors as soon as 2021, but a lot of it could depend on what the status is for the minor leagues this upcoming season. Another question for the Orioles, what are they going to do to build on the promising 2020 that they had? It was a positive season generally from them, but I don't expect to see a lot of trades and player ads of, big name free agents aren't going to be added by the Orioles. They're not at that point just yet. But they could be just a year or two away from being at that point where they're like, okay, let's bring in some veterans on these couple-year deals and start making things happen. They could be just a year or two away from that. We're gonna get a chance to see Trey Mancini back. He missed the season after as he was undergoing treatment for cancer, but he's apparently doing well now. Breakout outfielder Anthony Santander will get a chance to try to back up his performance. So really, it's just going to be interesting to see how they back up their promising 2020 season. As for their needs this offseason, again, like I said, I don't expect any big free agent ads, but they could use a veteran or two on a short-term deal for that rotation. So I wouldn't be surprised to see someone along the lines of Mike Minor or J.A. Happ, Drew Smiley, Gio Gonzalez, some proven veteran, not a star, on a 1-year deal, maybe a 2-year deal for some of those higher-end guys at a low cost. And, they could make some trades if they think that they could get something from some of their more expensive proven players like the power-hitting infielder Renato Nunez or Pedro Severino, the catcher. If they think they can get some attractive prospects from that, I wouldn't be surprised to see them swing those kind of deals as well, because they're always trying to add some prospects at this point in time. The Boston Red Sox are the next team up here. Wow, this was a bad season in 2020 for the Red Sox. I gave them a D- for their 2020 performance. Chris Sale was out for the season, undergoing Tommy John. Mookie Betts, we know what happened to him, traded to Los Angeles. The Red Sox completely collapsed in 2020. They finished last in the AL East. The pitching staff had the third worst ERA in baseball. J.D. Martinez took a step back at the plate. Andrew Benintendi, basically a lost season for him. One positive, power-hitting first base prospect Bobby Dalbec impressed down the stretch, 8 homers and 80 at-bats for him. So, they learned this past season that they have to have more high-quality pitching depth. Obviously you can't predict the kind of situations that happen with Sale and Eduardo Rodriguez, who contracted COVID-19 and then developed a heart condition. So you can't predict anything like that happening, of course, but the club was forced to turn to just so many inexperienced arms that were just not ready or not at a high enough level to be productive in the major leagues. Um, Rodriguez's status for the beginning of the season isn't clear. Sale, like I just mentioned a few minutes ago, not going to be ready to go for the beginning of the year. So the Red Sox cannot enter 2021 without doing something to that rotation. Their big move this offseason so far, well, it was the rehiring of Alex Cora. We've already talked about that, so don't have time to get into all that. But it's going to be a smooth transition for him in that clubhouse. I'm confident in his return to that clubhouse, but there's a lot of needs for this Red Sox team. And some questions. And one of them is the front office going to be willing to spend? The whole part of the big deal with them trading Mookie Betts to the Dodgers was to try to get closer to the competitive balanced tax threshold. They were trying to cut salary, trying to cut costs. Now their financial situation is more in order, so does that mean they want to keep it that way and not spend much, or are they willing to make another big move? I don't know. I mean, they could go out and sign Trevor Bauer or George Springer, and it wouldn't shock me, but they could decide, hey, we don't want to spend that money and get back right where we were. There's also a question of who's going to handle center field for them. Jackie Bradley Jr. is a free agent. They could bring him back. Options after him are pretty thin if you're not signing George Springer. It's like Kevin Pillar, Michael Taylor, Gerard Dyson. It's not all that exciting. As far as their offseason needs, they need help at at starting pitcher, I should say. So even if they don't bring in one of the big guys, they could bring in a veteran like Charlie Morton or Jose Quintana or Corey Kluber, Garrett Richards, somebody to help try to stabilize that rotation. They also need help in the bullpen, and they could pursue a high-end option like Liam Hendricks or Brad Hand or Alex Colomé. And they need an answer at second base. Dustin Pedroia, it looks like he's not coming back. That era is ending. So maybe the big play, LeMahieu again, but there are cheaper options like Colton Wong and Tommy La Stella as well. Regardless, the Red Sox have some real needs this offseason. They've got a great core, but they've got some needs. They've got some things they need to fill, and it looks like they're going to have to do it externally for a lot of those situations. It's not going to be just internal solutions. The New York Yankees are next up here in the AL East. I gave them a C plus for their 2020 performance, which may seem harsh, but and of course, they had all these injuries, which made their path to the playoffs not very smooth, but they wouldn't have actually ended up in the postseason if not for the expanded format. Now, there's no question they were one of the best teams in the American League, but you can't just let them off the hook because they were one of the World Series favorites entering the season. And they were largely healthy entering the playoffs. They hit home runs, so many home runs in their playoff games, but then they were let down by their starting pitchers, not named Garrett Cole, in their loss to the Rays in the ALDS. And so the Yankees, the expectations are so high that I have to grade accordingly. So I gave them a C plus. Now, I think the big lesson the Yankees learned, they need more than just Garrett Cole come October. They need other proven high-end starters. They passed on an opportunity, I should say, to add starting pitching prior to the trade deadline. And now Masahiro Tanaka and J.A. Happ are free agents. They need help in the rotation. I would not be surprised at all to see them add some of those high-profile guys, whether it's a big splash like Bauer. There really only is that one starter who's really the big splash in Bauer. Other than that, there's a lot of interesting arms in that next level, and I wouldn't be surprised to see the Yankees add multiple of them, such as maybe bringing back Masahiro Tanaka. As far as what they've done so far this offseason, they exercised their option for 2022 on Zach Britton, which seems weird, but they had to do that to guarantee he comes back this upcoming season. And he's been outstanding for them. The big question for the Yankees this offseason, it's very clear, will they bring back DJ LeMahieu? They had a 2-year, $24 million contract with him. It was an absolute steal. He won a Silver Slugger in 2019, and he was even better this past year. He won a second career batting title with a career-high OPS in 2020. He's expressed interest in remaining in New York. They clearly love to have him back, but maybe they decide that it doesn't work out because of either A, maybe they want to put their money in starting pitcher and getting starters instead, or B, maybe they feel the need to move Gleyber Torres off of shortstop, in which case it'd be hard to bring LeMahieu back. maybe they try to sign or acquire a shortstop instead, and that would leave little room for LeMahieu. So that's the big question for the Yankees. Will they bring back DJ LeMahieu? Another question, will Gary Sanchez remain the starting catcher? General manager Brian Cashman said that was a fair question. And Kyle Higashioka started 5 of the team's 7 postseason games. Sanchez is the best power hitting catcher in baseball, but he really struggled this year. He's hit for a low average, and it's continued to sink lower and lower in recent years, honestly, with a few exceptions. And they could easily turn to him again. The upside is huge, but they could also factor into the JT Realmuto sweepstakes or get creative as well. Their offseason needs, in addition to figuring out the catcher position, they need to bring in some sort of starter. We've already talked about this, and figure out what's happening in the middle infield if they don't bring back DJ LeMahieu. The Tampa Bay Rays, the 4th team in the AL East to discuss, they got an A+ in my grades for this season. This is a story I published last week on the website. And they got an A+ because, of course, they got an A+. They won the AL pennant. They used their depth, their defense, their strong pitching, their formula to post the best record in the AL, win their first division title since 2010, reach the World Series for the first time since 2008. And yes, it ended badly, but look, I mean, they fell to the best team in baseball. They were incredible in 2020. And, the lesson for them is that their approach can work at a really high level, and it did in 2020. There's not much else to say. Other than that, we've talked about the Rays a lot. So far this offseason, they made a couple of interesting moves in guys that they did not bring back. They declined their options on Charlie Morton and catcher Mike Zunino. And so the key questions for them, well, they relate to those two guys and those two positions. One, will Charlie Morton come back? They declined his option, which was $15 million. And they say they want to bring him back, but it appears they're not willing to maybe go any higher than $10 million for Morton. And I have to think there's going to be some club that's going to be willing to give him more for just a 1-year deal because of his upside. And if they don't bring him back, they probably, even though they have a great foundation for a rotation, if they don't bring him back, I think they'll probably try to sign some sort of cheaper mid-tier starter to add some stability to that rotation. And then there's the question for them of who's behind the plate. They literally have no catchers anymore. That Michael Perez, their backup, is gone. He was claimed by Pittsburgh. Zunino is gone now. Oh, he's a free agent. They could bring him back, but if they don't, they're going to have to turn to somebody else, probably on the free agent market, because the only guy on their depth chart right now is a prospect who hasn't played above A-ball. So they're going to have to figure something out there. So their offseason needs, they need a catcher. They're going to probably look for something at starting pitcher. Maybe it's like a veteran like Cole Hamels, John Lester, or Mike Minor for a low cost. If it's a lower cost for, they're more comfortable paying that kind of cost than, $15 million for Charlie Morton. A final team to talk about here in the AL East is the Toronto Blue Jays. They're a young team that I gave an A for their 2020 performance. They took a significant step forward this season, despite the fact that they were not playing at all in their home ballpark due to COVID-19 travel restrictions. They couldn't play in Toronto. They worked pretty hard. They were able to piece together a serviceable rotation behind Hyunjin Ryu, I should say. And they got a breakout year from Teoscar Hernandez and strong showings from Rowdy Tellez, I should say, Lourdes Gurriel Jr., Randall Grichuk. There's a lot of exciting offensive young pieces for this team. They finished above 500 for the first time and made the playoffs for the first time since 2016. They ended up getting swept by the eventual AL champion Rays in the wild card series. There's a couple of key areas for the Blue Jays that if they address, they could help this young core take another step forward. They have the foundation from Hernandez and Gurriel Jr., Bo Bichette, Cavan Biggio, Vladimir Guerrero, so much young talent. But they need to improve in some areas. They need to do a better job of throwing strikes. They need to put together a better defense. Their big move this offseason so far has been a 1-year, $8 million deal with lefty Robbie Ray, which in some ways is odd because he's not exactly helping their problem with throwing strikes. He led the National League in walks in 2020 despite getting traded to the American League at the trade deadline. So that's not exactly helping that problem. But the Blue Jays have some questions about, will Vladimir Guerrero take another step forward. It's easy to forget he's just 21 years old still, and we've kind of come to expect these great things from these young stars because of what we've seen from Juan Soto and Fernando Tatis Jr., but there's still time for Gurriel, even though he's been good but not great his first few seasons in the majors. Uh, will they add another high-end starter behind Ryu? That's one thing that I'm really looking for them to see if they're willing to do, because that's one thing that can take them another step forward in matching up better in a potential playoff series. Ryu is great, but right now Nate Pearson looks like their number 2 starter, and he made his major league debut this past season, and he had some struggles. He's confident. There's no reason to panic with him. He's a high prospect, but they need somebody else. I really believe in that rotation behind Ryu they can depend on. And also they need something at third base now because they're going to want to upgrade from Travis Shaw, who struggled in 2020. So DJ LeMahieu would be the big play. Justin Turner, another option if he doesn't return to the Dodgers. We'll see what they do, but they're going to do something, I'm confident, in the infield, probably, to address third base in particular. And that is a look at our AL East preview.